the idea of Medicaid cuts, work requirements, and leaving defense spending alone, are you okay with that?
If you look at where we're going to find our savings, it's got to be from several places. And by the way, you know, it's funny, I was talking to Mr. Smith and other people about Social Security, which is another huge spending item, right? And something we can bipartisanly get done to push off the catastrophe that's waiting for us in about 7 years with an automatic 21% cut. If you look at Medicare, it's an 11% automatic cut with no vote on it. If we don't do something to save that budget process for Medicare. When you talk about Medicaid, which is supposed to be paid for by the states originally, now which we've taken over a lion's share of the spending. And by the way, I want to correct you a little bit on your stats. We spend about 12% of our budget on Medicaid, about 15% on military, but that's not counting what states spend on Medicaid. So there's a little bit of adjustment on those numbers. I think, just to be fair, you're very, very well-researched. You know your stuff. I respect you. You know that. But when it comes to spending overall, we are $36 trillion in debt. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have a government and we didn't have $1 trillion in deficit interest payments per year, it would take us over 6 years to pay it off.
Yeah.
That's impossible. We cannot do this anymore, or we're going to have a higher interest rate next year, and then we're going to add another $9 trillion on top of the regular inflationary costs to debt, and we're eventually going to lose our currency standard in the United States. So you tell me where we're going to find the savings. I mean, everybody says they have a great program that needs to be paid for. There is hundreds of billions of dollars of Medicaid for waste, fraud, and abuse, in my opinion. We could get rid of a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse just by AI and the way we streamline the administration process, which is about 25% of every dollar spent on healthcare, which is a $5 trillion industry per year. We have to be more innovative. We have to be more original, and we have to find where we can cut these, whether it be in Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, whatever it is.
Yeah, but I think,
that's 75% of our budget right there.
Doc,
if we don't do something, we're in trouble.
I get you. There's no question about it. Congressman Smith, what I'm saying, though, is you pick your priorities. I don't like hearing that they don't want to touch defense spending. They want to add $100 billion to it, but you're going to go after the most vulnerable in society. That's the part I think is upside down, and I think a lot of Republicans will feel that way.
The worst part about it is the budget reconciliation package, and Richard just gave a very impassioned speech for fiscal responsibility, and I don't disagree that that is important, but the budget reconciliation package that he's going to vote for is going to add trillions of dollars to the deficit, and it's going to add them so that they can do right now $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. So, Richard, I hear you. Then you obviously have to vote no on the budget reconciliation package, which is going to add to the deficit. And the simple solution up front is don't do $4.5 trillion worth of tax cuts, okay? And yes, we need to have a very difficult conversation about health care. And then one other point I want to get in there on all these firings of federal employees, they're not really impacting the debt or the deficit either. And we're going in and we're firing people regardless of how qualified they are. We're firing the people on a probationary who are on probation, which basically means they've been there for less than 2 years.
Right.
When Musk took over Twitter, he actually looked at all of his thousands of engineers and he said, who's good, who's not? And he tested their coding skills to see who was good. So what are we really doing here if we're simply firing massive amounts of employees, irrespective of whether or not they're good at their job? We're just gutting the capability of the federal government and not saving any money. But the big point is $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. I mean, I take Chris's point on the defense budget as well, but that's the part of this that puts the lie to any argument that this has anything to do with fiscal responsibility.
Well, Doc, it does for you, so what's your answer?
Yeah, well, first of all, when we talk about the tax cuts, it's something that Biden had his entire presidency. It's not new cuts. It's sustaining the cuts that he benefited in our economy that's been doing pretty well because we have freed the businesses to be competitive in the world market. At 21%, it's my turn.
Go ahead.
And since we've been at 21%, for all Biden's administration, and it's benefited us in a world economy where we have to compete with Russia and China, and we increase that. It would be a tax increase if we don't solidify what we've already had during the entire Biden administration. Sure. If we get rid of that, we all of a sudden lose our competitive. We have fewer jobs, fewer taxable people, fewer profits. We collapse. We found that when you increase taxes on businesses, it doesn't always give you more revenue for the government to work with. That's historic.
Listen,
you can't factually deny that.
All right, I'm going to give the last word to Congressman Smith because I gave you the first one, Doc. But let's just be very clear, just where I'm coming from on it. I'm fine with you guys finding ways to cut and let the people reward or punish you for it in the elections. I'm just saying that you should be cutting and looking for places to cut regardless where you can. Whatever the tax policy is, to me, is an other on that. If you're going to cut taxes, you're going to create more pressure to cut spending. That's what Trump didn't do the last time. That's how he got sideways with the conservatives, namely Mr. Paul Ryan, who was Speaker of the House at the time, because he wouldn't cut spending. He said the tax cuts would pay for themselves. They didn't. Congressman Smith, last word to you. Make it quick, please.
Just two quick things. I mean, again, the package in front of us is going to cut taxes by it's going to put policy in place that is going to result in $4.5 trillion less revenue, if we wish to be technically accurate about it. So if we pass this budget reconciliation package, we are going to significantly increase the deficit. So my big request is stop selling this line of baloney that this is about fiscal responsibility, because clearly it is not. Second, let's look at the history. Cutting taxes does not increase revenue. It doesn't, okay? I wish it did, all right? It would make my job the simplest job in the world, but it doesn't. A lot of things go into a competitive economy.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.